So me and the man were in the big parlor room, and this was kind of a little bit of a eerie thing. We were watching some kind of a old movie, black and white movie. I can't remember if it starred Cary Grant or Humphrey Bogart. They at one point a woman gets slapped, but she doesn't seem like she really minds. It's almost like, I think at one point in the movie, the lead, I can't remember if it was Humphrey Bogart or Cary Grant, they slapped this beautiful blonde-haired girl with big, beautiful blonde, thick hair with big brown eyebrows. And he smacks her right across the face, and she almost acts like, not like she liked it or something, but just a second later they embrace into a passionate kiss. So I don't know what that was a symbol of. But no sooner did that scene happen and the power went out. Now, in a big old manor house like this, sometimes it's still fuse operated or controlled or whatever you say in the breaker box. It's not breakers, it's a fuse box, so the big old giant fashioned fuses. And sometimes the man just doesn't have the gumption to get up straight away and even light a candle. Or let alone go change these fuses. It's not like you flip a breaker. You got to change out a fuse. It's kind of, you got to find the fuses. They're always in some kind of big, old, dusty drawer. He can never remember what drawer they're in. So he just kind of sat there for a moment. And I have to say, when everything's quiet like that and there's no, ambient noise, the walls and the panes of glass are so thick, and if it happens to be a little quiet outside at that point, then there's no noise coming in from the outside. And if there's nothing going on, if there's no air purifiers or ventilators or whatever, the hum of the refrigerator, there's nothing making a noise. The overall quiet, the din, the sparkle, it's refreshing, it's invigorating, it's something that you don't notice when there's so much other noise clutter. And it's kind of a thing. It's like, the man, he started drinking again, although he didn't drink today. He's kind of waffling. He's going back and forth. He'd spent a long time dry. It's kind of like that when all the electric goes out in the house. It's kind of like when you get dry. Sobriety is almost like an intoxicant, like you haven't experienced stone cold reality in so long when you get dried out, that it's almost like you're experiencing an intoxicant, so to speak. But the man, after a long pause and a deep breath, and I noticed the man's wheezing a little bit, not a wheeze, but he's just a labored breath, not even a labored breath, but it's not crystal clear anymore. There's something wrong with his lungs or something. I don't know if it's his nasal passages or his lungs, I'm not sure. But after a long pause, well, we both just kind of enjoyed it. It was just marvelous just to experience it, the quiet and the kind of like the silence, yet there's a sparkle to everything. And after a big exhale, the man, he was kind of fidgeting a little bit with his pant legs and knocking a little lint off his knee. And he looks over at me and he says, one thing I'll give my dad credit for, he was just what you might call pitch perfect. He was a big enough son of a bitch that when he died, everybody was really sad to see him go, because he was a provider. He was the patriarch. He was the rock of the family. He was the one who, sustained us, and he's the one who, he took it from his dad, but he built it up big and everything. And, but he was just the pitch perfect right amount, a son of a bitch, okay? A hard ass. So that when he passed away, there was a little bit of a lang syne, and at the funeral, there was a little bit of a morose feeling, and there's lots of memories associated with it. But I mean, the second you walked away from that funeral, yeah, you were okay. It's not like you were mourning. Like if you're, if somebody, I don't even know what it is, but when you lose a loved one, a lot of times there's a long period of mourning. I'm telling you what, 3-4 days later, after the experience of the funeral, it was enough to make it emotionally charged. But when you walked away, it was as if you were wiping the dust off your feet. You weren't that worried about it. You did not carry that mourning away from the cemetery. I always thanked my dad for that, He was a good dad. He was a good guy. But after he passed away, you were like, well, He wasn't loving enough or close enough or caring enough or, he didn't endear himself enough. He wasn't emotionally bonding enough so that you really feel there's this big gap, there's this gaping hole, there's this, you're so sad that you lost something. You're like, yeah, well, whatever. I mean, Dad's gone, but, I don't know. I don't know how close we were in the real life. I mean, and I always thank my dad. That's what you call a pitch perfect son of a bitch. The kind of guy that when he dies, everybody's kind of, oh man, I can't believe it. And everybody comes together themselves at the funeral and at the whatever you call it, the wake, and after the where they go and eat all the food and stuff after the funeral. But when you walked away from that cemetery, you weren't really that torn up or that bad off. I always thank my dad for that. That was kind of a nice thing about Dad. And I looked at the man and I was like, well, buddy, I guess you could consider yourself what you might call lucky. And he says, hell yeah. Because it's a hard thing to go through. And if they leave you with a sense that, you could appreciate them, but yet you're not morose and all torn up and depressed and all that kind of stuff, you really got to say, hey, tip your hat to the guy. I looked at the man, I said, yeah, I guess so.